Hi, welcome to another edition of the Alan Rosenberg Show. It is the morning after Thanksgiving, so if you're in the United States, I hope you had a wonderful holiday, probably recovering from all that turkey. I am. I don't know, a few weeks ago, I got a request from one of our regular viewers, Lori Jocko. And Lori, thanks for this idea. I think it's a great idea. She came up with a topic, and she called it Successful Solo Artists from Major Bands. You know, people who've had great solo careers, but they came from major bands. Might seem like an obvious topic, but it's actually really interesting if you delve into it a little bit. Then Callum McGregor, you know, from Scotland, he sent a request kind of similar. He called it Connections, Feeders, Offshoots, Side Project. So similar, but a little bit different. Also, great idea. And I was going to knock out a video that would kind of cover that. But then, in minutes, I wrote down a list of some that just popped into my head. In 3 minutes, I basically got a list of like 35, and there's plenty more that I could think of. So this is going to have to be a series. I tend to like to do a video that encompasses a lot, as opposed to some channels that do like they create a series. Obviously, they just want like clickbait to get you to keep coming back. I'm not about that at all. But in this case, this is going to be a series, and I hope you agree that it's going to be a good one. Some really interesting major solo artists that are successful that came from major bands. We're going to start with one that might be the most interesting to me, and that's Genesis and the offshoots that they had and how successful they've been, but yet it's really interesting that they were successful. So if you know me, you know my channel, you can go to playlists and discographies by artists and things like that. And I do a lot of videos I've done on Genesis because here in the United States, not to toot my own horn, I've done videos on it. I was a really early adopter of Genesis. You could watch those videos again if you go into art discographies by artists. I got into Genesis in 1972, 1973. I got first pressings of Foxtrot and Nursery Crime, and here's an import of Trespass. And I was way ahead of the game with Genesis. In fact, at that time, I didn't know anybody in America, none of my friends, I didn't know anybody who even heard of Genesis. They were popular in Italy. That's why I'm wearing an Italian hat, because I like Italy. And they were ahead of the game with Genesis. But I was a huge fan. In fact, they were my second favorite band from 1972, 73 through 77. Then for me, they kind of lost their originality, and I still buy all the Genesis albums, but not just a good pop rock band, in my opinion. But anyway, their story is really interesting because, they were, even when they were popular, Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, 1975, which is when Peter Gabriel left the band after that tour, that. They were not a huge band. In America, they were just playing, relatively small theater-type places. And even after Phil Collins took over on lead vocals and, they did A Trick of the Tail, they were playing like the Beacon Theater in New York, not major places. And it wasn't until Wind and Wuthering that they went to arenas in America. They played Madison Square Garden, didn't sell it out. And it wasn't until, and then there were 3 that they played the Garden and really were able to sell. By then, Steve Hackett had already left. He left after Seconds Out, the mixing of Seconds Out. So they were a sizable band, but not a huge band. So the idea that those guys went solo and had oftentimes huge careers is interesting. So let's cover it. Now you can go back to, let's talk about Peter Gabriel. So he's the first one who went solo, and he went solo, of course, after Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, put out this self-titled Peter Gabriel album. There was 3 of them, basically, and had Salisbury Hill on there, Modern Love, and a great album, which I have downstairs. Great solo record. I am a fan of Peter Gabriel. I've seen him live. He's an artist with a capital A. He's not the kind of artist that I like everything by him. And although I'm a Genesis completist, I am not a completist on any of the solo stuff. But for Peter Gabriel, the self-titled one, I left it, the vinyls downstairs. I love that. Peter Gabriel Plays Live is a really good one, good live record. Here's another live one. That's a cool one as well. This is Secret World Live. I tend to like his live records. This is a beautiful package. You ever see this one? This is New Blood and Live in London. This is a mega package of the Live in London and the studio recording New Blood, where he did different versions. Peter Gabriel is an artist, and I totally appreciate his talent. But when I don't listen to him that often, and when I do, I actually tend to listen to a compilation, talking about compilation albums. So this is a good one, Shaking the Tree. And if you want more, you can get something like this, which is called Hit, which is a cute name. And this is the definitive 2 CD collection. So for me, as much as I like Peter Gabriel, I don't need everything by him, even though I totally appreciate his artistry. Then we were talking about around 77. They're doing Wind and Wuthering. I love it. They do Seconds Out, one of my favorite live albums of all time. And Steve Hackett does his first solo record, which was Voyage of the Alkali, which I thought was a really excellent album. This is a really nice version of it with a slipcase. Excellent album. And Steve Hackett has had a really prolific, long-standing solo career, that is for sure. Lots of releases. He's another one that I like some of his albums. Some of them are just okay, but I think he's a great artist. And then he did something really interesting. Since Genesis, when they would tour and reform and tour, they were only playing really the latter-day stuff, and they would throw in some of that old classic stuff as like a medley. So I really wasn't interested anymore in seeing Genesis live. He took over that mantle, him and the artist called the Musical Box, that band, that Canadian tribute band. And he starts doing the old classic Genesis stuff. And then he even did studio versions like Watcher of the Skies, Genesis Revisited by Steve Hackett. And, this is a great live record. I like his live stuff. The Tokyo Tapes with John Wetton, Chester Thompson, Ian McDonald, Julian Colbert. This is a really cool, I have a DVD of this and a VHS. That's a great live record. I tend to like a lot of Hackett's live stuff. He's an amazing guitarist. He has one called Time Lapse. But when he started doing that Genesis Revisited stuff, man, I just fell in love with it. Nat Sylvan is the singer. He does a great job. There's a lot of these. Genesis Revisited live at the Royal Albert Hall. And he mixes in classic Genesis live stuff there, and then as well as solo stuff. This was just amazing. And I see Hackett when he plays live locally, then he would start doing tours based on albums. So like here's Total Experience Live in Liverpool, Acolyte to Wolflight with Genesis Classics. But he's done tours where he's doing, Selling England by the Pound and Foxtrot and things like that. I tend to like these mixtures a lot as well. But I still like, his solo stuff. Again, he does these Genesis Revisited. This is Genesis Revisited 2 studio recordings where he goes back. I tend to like the live stuff better, but his solo stuff is really good. Here's a good one I like, The Night Siren. That was a really good release. I saw that tour live. And you could even check out, this is a really cool compilation, and this is called The Unauthorized Biography. And this is a little bit old, but it's got a lot of his great stuff. He has taken on the mantle of performing live and playing that old Genesis stuff for the original Genesis fans like myself. It's really the only way to see it and hear that music anymore, except like the Musical Box, the Canadian tribute band. So Hackett did a brilliant thing, plus releasing his own stuff as well. And at least for somebody like me, when he was in Genesis, he added such originality and so much texture and that amazing guitar work. And then when he was gone, you really felt the difference. At least I did. As much as I like And Then There Were Three, I desperately missed that guitar work from him. It was a really Tony Banks keyboard-heavy album, which I like it. There's a lot of great stuff on there. But they never recovered for me after Steve Hackett left. Speaking of Tony Banks, he's interesting. You know, when in the original Genesis, as far as songwriters go, he was largely considered the most important songwriter member in the band at that time. Really, him, Mike Rutherford, Phil Collins. Phil Collins really didn't contribute much in those early days. Tony Banks really was the main guy, and it's interesting that Tony Banks' solo career has really not taken off. I bought A Curious Feeling when it came out. I was not impressed. I wound up getting rid of it years ago just for space reasons. Mike Rutherford's also, he did Small Creeps Day. I bought that when it came out. Got really good reviews, but I wasn't overly impressed by it. And eventually got rid of, I had Acting Very Strange, is that what the other one was? I had 2 of his solo records. I eventually got rid of those. But then, what did Mike Rutherford do? He created an offshoot band, Mike and the Mechanics, and lo and behold, had a lot of hits. And they're really catchy tunes, you know, very much AOR, kind of like, almost like the latter-day Genesis stuff. But, you know, it's really good for what it is. And certainly All I Need Is a Miracle and The Living Years is incredible. What an amazing song that is. Silent Running, you know, for me, All I Need Is This Mike and the Mechanics hits. This could have been one of those All I Need Is hits collection for Mike and the Mechanics. If you're a really old Genesis fan, you remember before Steve Hackett, they had Anthony Phillips. And he's had a long, he releases a lot of records, and well, you know, this is one of them, Private Parts. This is Private Parts and Pieces 9, Dragonfly Dreams. You know, a lot of like acoustic kind of guitars. It's nice background music. Really, for me, what I've heard from him is not overly essential, but, you know, interesting and worth a mention. And finally, let's talk about the elephant in the room, for lack of a better word, and that is Phil Collins. So Phil Collins, I'm a drummer, was a drummer. And when Phil Collins was literally just a drummer in Genesis, I just thought he was extraordinary. Oh my God, what an incredible drummer. They just went to another level after he joined the band with Nursery Crime. But, and they would, you know, occasionally sing lead vocals on like One Nice Ballad, More For Me. He was on Selling England by the Pound as an entrance, as an example. But he was really just a drummer. And he was never really, I mean, he was obviously crucial in the band, but he wasn't known as the big songwriter in the band. It really wasn't until Duke in 1980, and now they were a big band by then. And the story was the band was going to break up. Phil Collins' marriage was not in good shape, and he was going to leave the band and go to Vancouver, Canada, where his wife, or an ex-wife, they were struggling in their marriage. He went to Vancouver to try to save his marriage. And in fact, well, they talked about it. Phil Collins wrote a song about it. And it was a B-side, actually. It was the B-side of Many Too Many, the single from, and then there were 3, the second single. And you could only find that on this box, Genesis Archive 2, or you need the Many Too Many single. And he wrote a song called Vancouver right there. And in fact, The Day the Light Went Out was also a B-side of Many Too Many. So Vancouver was Phil Collins writing about, you know, going to Vancouver and possibly leaving Genesis to save his marriage. He goes to Vancouver, and it doesn't work out, unfortunately. And he comes back to the band. At that time, that's when Tony Banks was doing A Curious Feeling, and Mike Rutherford was doing Small Creeps Day. So they come back. They're going to reform. They didn't officially break up. And they do Duke, and this is really where Phil Collins really starts writing. And the 2 songs that he did on this that he contributed was Misunderstanding, which was the hit single. Very different sound for Genesis, and that was a hit. There's a video of it. You know, There Must Be Some Misunderstanding. That's that. And then Please Don't Ask, a beautiful track. So these were the 2 songs that Collins really did on as a songwriter on Duke, and were powerful. But he had a lot left over, and that's when he went solo and did Face Value, a really, really personal album that he's just laying it all out with his marital troubles on this album. Of course, everybody knows this album was his biggest hit and In the Air Tonight, and but this is a great, great debut album. And of course, it's got his version of Behind the Lines, which was also on Duke. So this is his first solo record, and he became a superstar. But it's kind of ironic when you think about it, because he was the least important songwriter in Genesis up to that point. He just took off, which is amazing. And of course, the second solo record was also really personal. Hello, I Must Be Going, another massive success. But, you listen to the bitterness and the anger. I don't care anymore. He just was laying so much out, which I thought was really courageous, But I guess he just had to. It was just what he was living. And you hear the pain that he was going through, both on the debut Face Value and Hello, I Must Be Going. Very courageous moves, I think, from Phil Collins. And really, really coming out as a songwriter. And, then he became Phil Collins, the superstar, arguably even bigger than Genesis, maybe, or certainly on a par. No jacket required, and he gets the studio. And now it's Phil Collins, the massive superstar. But no doubt about it, a massive, massive talent. And, some of his albums are really good. I don't have all of them, but seriously, another really successful album. He just knows how to write a great song. This was a heavier album, both sides. I saw this tour live. Always puts on a great show. He's always got amazing musicians. And talking about live albums, I love live albums. The Phil Collins live album, this one, Serious Hits Live, is fantastic, for what it is. It's a great mixture, phenomenal band. This is a great live album. I have the Laserdisc as well. And then you could always get like a hits collection. But Phil Collins is certainly the real deal. He also did Brand X. I have a bunch of Brand X albums. That was in the 70s. Where he really wanted to spread his wings and do other things, and he did. And he's playing like jazz fusion. He's an amazing musician. Was an amazing musician, and turned out to be an amazing songwriter. And that's what makes it surprising. It's nice to follow a band and how they change, and even how a guy like Phil Collins, who's an amazing musician, jazz drummer, and drummer with Genesis and Brand X, becomes a phenomenal songwriter and becomes a huge, successful solo artist. It's really interesting. So that is the story about Genesis, video number 1 in this series of really successful solo careers from major artists. And Genesis, it really, I don't think it gets much more interesting when you think about Genesis, and certainly the original Genesis, because these guys went solo when Genesis was not at this mega level. And they all have had really distinguished solo careers. Peter Gabriel, Phil Collins, Steve Hackett, Mike and the Mechanics, Mike Rutherford, Tony Banks. I guess probably disappointing with his solo career. Anthony Phillips, well, he's got to dig deep for that. It's interesting. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for the suggestion for this video series, and it's gonna go on. I'll do what I do with the other series. Do a video, take a break, go back to it, but we'll continue the series of great, successful solo careers from major artists, from major bands. I think it's a really worthwhile one. So thanks, Callum, and thank you, Laura Jacko, for your wonderful suggestion and watching the channel. If you're new to my channel, hit subscribe. Go to playlist. There is 400 plus videos here. And if you want to see my videos on Genesis, you can go to like artist discographies, ranking, go-to songs. There's 100 plus videos there, and there's videos on Genesis. And that's how we're going to end this video. There you go, David. Anyway, as always, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I hope you enjoy the weekend, and I will see you next time on the Alan Rosenberg Show. Now I'm going to pick this stuff up. Have a good one.